Now, for those of you watching online, you're just going to have to be here in person if you want to see what just happened. That is really cool. Now, as I was preparing for today's message, I got to tell you, there's a lot of things that struck me that are really a common part of our culture and a common part of life that just simply did not exist a generation or two ago. And as I mentioned a few examples, I promise not to be a grumpy old man, okay? And when I say grumpy old man, that's the kind of guy who goes, "Hey, when I was a kid, we had to walk 5 miles to school uphill, both ways." Okay, so one thing that struck me was streaming, okay? Now, once upon a time, there was no such thing as streaming. There was antennas, rabbit ears. That's how you got your TV. That's how you got your video, right? A little pair of rabbit ears sitting on top of the TV. "David, go adjust that." Okay. "Yeah, now stand there, just like that." "How long?" "Just keep standing there." Cloud computing. There was a time when the only way, there was a time when we didn't have computers. There was a time early on when if you wanted to use a program or an application, you had to stick in something called a floppy disk. First of all, they were 5¼ inches and really thin. And if you went like this, they were floppy. That's how they call them, floppy disks. But that was the only way that you could actually run an application. Well, then the applications, got put on these 3½ inch disks that were still called floppy, but they weren't floppy. Then there was hard drives. Ooh. And you could actually run a program without having to stick anything into your computer. But now we have cloud computing. All those apps and all of our stuff is out there in the cloud somewhere. And then there was the advent of social media. How many of you remember MySpace? Okay. Did you know that MySpace was first introduced back in 2003? Became really popular in 2005. I remember that because our son David had just started Boy Scouts at the time. And MySpace was really starting to take off. And its peak in 2005, it had about 100 million monthly users. You know how many users it has now? 6 million. It went from here down to here. It still exists. A lot of people going, is that still a thing? Yeah, it is still a thing. Not quite as popular now because in 2019, they did a server upgrade and every single bit of data from 2016 backwards was gone. So all of those photos and all of those posts that people put on their MySpace profiles disappeared. But now we have all sorts of social media. We've got Facebook. And that was one of the reasons why MySpace went away, is because of Facebook. We've got Snapchat, we've got Instagram, we've got X, we've got True Social. We've got all sorts of social media platforms. And with the growth of social media, what else do we have? People call themselves social media influencers. Now, most of y'all know what I'm talking about when I talk about social media influencers. Just to be clear, that is an individual who has built a significant online presence and credibility on social media platforms that allow them to influence the opinions, behaviors, and this is key, purchasing decisions of their audience. Now, I tend to look a little unfavorably on people that call themselves influencers. And recent studies show that there's some really good reasons why. For example, a lot of social media influencers promote harmful products. It's not like they do a lot of research. How about disseminating misinformation? Yeah, that happens. fostering unrealistic beauty standards, creating a culture of comparison. Look at me, you don't have what I have. And promoting deceptive consumptive practices, like, for example, somebody and it features this product, and what they're not telling you is that the people that own that product are paying that person to feature that particular product. And add to that the fact that there just seems to be just a whole lot of built-in narcissism and hugely inflated egos. Now, what would you think if I told you that Jesus is asking you to be an influencer? Now, hold on, it's not as crazy as you might think. Because he is calling you to be the best kind of influencer. So what do I mean by that? Let's take a look. As ambassadors of Jesus Christ, we are called to be the best kind of influencer while allowing ourselves to be influenced by the best. Called to be the best kind of influencer as ambassadors. And just to be clear, when we talk about influence, we're talking about the power to have an important effect on someone or something. The power to have an important effect on someone or something. So, what's all this about us being ambassadors? We are. We are ambassadors of the King of Kings. So we are Christ's ambassadors. God is making his appeal through us. 2 Corinthians 5:20. Now, for those of you who have not been keeping up on the news, there's a whole lot of negotiating going on right now. There are negotiations going on right now for achieving peace in various parts of the world. There's negotiations going on right now to strike fair trade deals. There's negotiations going on for investments. Now, with all this negotiating going on, it's kind of difficult for any one individual to be doing every bit of the negotiating. And that's why people are appointed to represent the one doing the negotiating. And in some case, that includes ambassadors. Ambassadors are assigned to a specific location. It could be a country like Luxembourg or Israel or China, or it could be an organization like an ambassador to the United Nations. Now, the thing about ambassadors, if you think about it, they are bound to obey the instructions of the person that appointed them. And as far as possible, to only do what that leader would do if they were able to be there themselves. Now, just imagine for a moment how long an ambassador would last if they decided that they were going to do their own thing. Like you have an ambassador to Israel who says, hey, Israel, you know what? I like you, I don't like them, so why don't you go ahead and just drop a few nuclear bombs? Why not? Everybody would be appalled, and that ambassador would be pulled faster than you can say Jack Robinson. Why? Because that's not their job. Their job is to represent the person that appointed them. Their job is to take that position, not their own, to do what they've been called to do, not whatever they feel like doing. So as ambassadors for Jesus Christ, we are appointed by who? The King of Kings. We are appointed by Jesus as ambassadors to do what? Represent him. And to do what he would do if he were personally present. as ambassadors, what does that mean? It means that we should not be negotiating new terms. Well, you can get to heaven if, let's see, you're a good person. No, that Jesus is going, wait, that's not the deal. Those aren't the terms. Remember, I said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. You want to get to the Father, you got to go through me. You can't be making stuff up. We can't transact our own business. We can't follow our own plans. If we're ambassadors to Christ, we have to follow his plans. Why? Because we're representing him. We certainly can't promote our own welfare, and we certainly can't seek our own honor. Imagine an ambassador who says, you know what? I'll go to that state dinner that you're having only if you give me an award. In that case, y'all can sit home. As ambassadors of Jesus Christ, we are to represent our Lord and have a positive influence for his honor and his glory, not our own. Now, the thing is, as ambassadors, we are called to be the best kind of influencer of others. Psalm 119:9, their good deeds will be remembered forever. They will have influence and honor. I want to ask a question. Show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Hudson Taylor? Nobody. Not surprised. Number one, he was a missionary in China. So missionaries in China don't get a whole lot of publicity. Number two, he was a missionary in China in the 19th century. Not surprising that most people have not heard of him, but he is worth learning about. Why? After his death, the organization called China Inland Mission that he founded gained the distinction of being the largest Protestant mission agency in the world. Biographies of this gentleman, Hudson Taylor, inspired generations of Christians to follow his example of service and sacrifice. An Olympic gold medal followed his example after reading about him. Some other well-known gentlemen, maybe you've heard of him, Billy Graham, read about him and was influenced by his story. Now, it is difficult being a Christian in China. China is not really big on religious liberty. They have state-run, state-organized religions, and you can only be a part of that. And why is that? Because they want to control what it is you're reading. They want to control what it is you're saying. They want to control who it is you're associating with. And there's only one authority in China, and that is the government. They don't recognize that there's a higher authority called God. And so as a result, they tend to make it difficult to get material, get references, to meet, and all sorts of things. And to also do their own little bit of misinformation. Now, years ago, the communist government in China commissioned an author, and that author's duty was to write a biography of Hudson Taylor with the purpose of distorting the facts and presenting him in a bad light. Not too surprising. Why? Because they want to control the story. They want to control what people know, what people read, and so on. Now, they wanted to discredit the name of this missionary of the gospel, but as the author was doing his research, a funny thing happened. He was increasingly impressed by Hudson Taylor's saintly character, increasingly impressed by his godly life. And he found it extremely difficult to carry out his assigned task with a clear conscience. And eventually, at the risk of losing his own life, he laid aside his pen, he renounced his atheism, and he, the guy who was assigned to discredit this missionary, he received Jesus as his personal Lord and Savior. Now, did Hudson Taylor have any idea that that was going to happen? No. How could he know? So whether we realize it or not, our example does leave an impression on others. So we have to ask ourselves, what kind of impression do I want to leave? But the influencing, in the case of Jesus, goes two ways. We are called to be the best kind of influencer, kind of like Hudson Taylor, and we are also called to be influenced by the best, not the worst. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. Proverbs 13:20. I used to have this friend many years ago. The guy was a chameleon. Ever known anybody like that? Where whoever he was around, he kind of became like them. It was the most incredible thing. It didn't matter whether or not he believed what the people he was around were saying. He just said, yeah, right, I'm with you guys, yeah. But you know, the thing is, when people do that, eventually you see right through it, right? But the thing is, you hang around somebody long enough, you end up taking on the same kind of attitudes, using the same words, and engaging in some of the same actions. I had some friends, some were what my mom would call good friends. Some were less than good. And I noticed that when I was hanging around the less than good friends, I tended to do things that would get me into trouble. And when I hung around the people who were what my mom would call good friends, I never got into trouble. Why is that? Because when somebody walks with the wise, they become wise. When they are the companion of fools, they will suffer harm. I know, I suffered harm. It's not a fun place to be. Then also, think of this. We can influence others through words, actions, and attitudes. If you speak good words rather than worthless ones, you will be my spokesman. You must influence them. Do not let them influence you. Jeremiah 15:19. This is about using words to influence. There's a really interesting phenomenon that I noticed. Pastor Joyce and I, we do not use obscenities when we are speaking with other people. Okay? We just believe it's wrong. When I was a lot younger, I used to say, obscenities are the last refuge of the intellectually lazy. And the reason why is because people use obscenities when they can't think of anything else to say. They use them as nouns. They use them as adjectives, adverbs, verbs. When there are a million other words that are actually much better, but their emotions take over and they only use one word or two words, maybe three, for all of it. But anyway, Pastor Joyce and I, we don't do that. So we get around people that we know have a tendency to do that. We've noticed something. They don't talk that way when they're around us. Now, why do you suppose that is? It's because with our words, the words that we choose, and how we use those words, even without necessarily intending to, that's having an influence. Because they understand, okay, when I'm around these people, I need to clean up my speech a little bit. This is a good one. Psalm 112:9. They share freely and give generously to those in need. Their good deeds will be remembered forever. They will have influence and honor. And that is regarding actions. We saw earlier about Hudson Taylor and how his actions, how his lifetime of actions were remembered forever. They did have influence and they did bring honor. Not that he intended to bring honor to himself, but he got the honor. But who ultimately gets the honor? It's God. Yes. God gets the honor. God gets the glory, right? Yes. So when we take actions, we also can influence others if they're the kinds of actions that Jesus would do if he were present. How about this one? Philippians 2, verses 14 to 16. Do everything without complaining and arguing, so that no one can criticize you. Live clean, innocent lives as children of God, shining like bright lights in a world full of crooked and perverse people. That speaks to attitude. That is a very important component of influence, the best kind of influence. It's all about attitude. Why? Because, let me ask you, who is more effective? Is it somebody, and more effective in terms of getting people to want to be like him? Is it the guy who is always complaining? It's too hot. I'm uncomfortable. This food is terrible. No, nobody wants to be like that, right? You don't even want to be around like that, anybody like that. And it's like, man, I can't wait to get out of here. Where's the nearest exit? Or are you more likely to get somebody to want to be like you if you speak with optimism, with joy, with appreciation, with thankfulness? That makes an impression. That causes people to want to spend time with you, to influence their behavior as well. It's about attitude and actions and words. Sharing the gospel, I love this. Sharing the gospel is kind of like show and tell. Now, I know for most of you, it's been a long, long time since you've done show and tell. Okay? For others of you, it was probably last week. But what is it when we talk about show and tell? Show and tell is you bring something to school, you show people, and then you tell people about it, right? One of my favorite things for show and tell was my Hot Wheels. I would bring my Hot Wheels collection to school, and it's like, look, ooh, wow, and they were all nice. This is when I knew I had something about organization. My Hot Wheels were all in this nice collectible container, neatly arranged like this, and and all on display. So all I had to do is flip open the lid and you could see them all. And then once I showed my Hot Wheels collection, then I could talk about it. See, I've been getting these Hot Wheels for years, and I got a new one last Christmas, and it was part of this Mongoose and Snake Wild Wheelie set, and it allows you, you have these two dragsters that are going down this track, and they do wheelies like this. So I could talk about that, and people, the girls not so much, but the guys, I really got the guys' attention. Did they want one for themselves? Did they want a collection of those Hot Wheels? Some of them already had a collection of Hot Wheels. But did they want more Hot Wheels? Yes. Did they want to play with the Hot Wheels? Yes. When we are good to people and allow the love of Jesus to flow through our lives, through our words, actions, and attitudes, see, they become interested in what makes us different. They see our peace, our joy, our good works, and they want to know how they can have that too. It opens the door wide for us to tell them about God. I recently had an experience. I wanted to tell you about this. Went to this auto shop, and the guy that runs this auto shop, great guy. Some of the best service I've ever gotten. And he knows I'm a pastor. And not that long ago, I brought a car into him. It was not my car. Don't worry, it wasn't stolen. I brought this car into him because it was a car belonging to somebody in our church, and I wanted him to take a look at it to make sure everything was okay on it. Before I did that, this car had a big, giant, massive, industrial-size staple in the side of one of the tires, and I took it over to a tire store to see if they could just repair it. Usually they could do that for free, and they said, no, sorry, it's in the sidewall, can't touch it. So, okay, that's one tire that's got to be replaced. And then they took a look at the tread on the other tires, and they said, oh, okay, well, you've got very little tread left on these things, so you're actually going to need to replace all the tires. Okay, so replace the tires. The person who owned the car, by the way, they paid for it. I was just, helping them out by taking it around to these various locations. And then took it through the car wash, got it cleaned up a bit, and then brought it over to the repair shop. And I explained to him, everything that we'd been doing before we even got to the repair shop. And he said, why do you do this? And I had a really good discussion with him about, see, that opens the door, right? So I had a really good discussion with him about, look, this is somebody that needs our help. And we can do this. And if we can do it, then we're going to do it. Because it's the right thing to do. And the guy just looks at me like, wow. That's what's called influence. Through your words, through your actions, through your attitude. Did I complain about doing this? Oh, the line at the tire shop was so long and I had to wait. Oh, it was terrible. He wouldn't have wanted anything to do with me at that point. He's like, oh, okay, get this guy out of here. No, it's words, actions, attitude. When all those things line up, then people go, hey, that's cool. I want a part of that. That's how it works. You have influence through what you say. Colossians 4:6. Let your conversation be gracious and attractive so that you will have the right response for everyone. You have influence through how you act. Be careful to live properly among your unbelieving neighbors. Then, even if they accuse you of doing wrong, they will see your honorable behavior, and they will give honor to God when he judges the world. That was 1 Peter 2:12. And you influence by showing that you care and how you care. Share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ, Galatians 6:2. You know, Albert Einstein, this is all about setting an example, right? Setting the right example. Setting the kind of example that Jesus would be setting. And when you set the right example, that leads to influence. Albert Einstein is credited with this, and it's a wonderful quote. Setting an example is not the main means of influencing another. It is the only means. You can talk until you're blue in the face to try and influence somebody. But if you're living that example, that works better than anything else. Now, to conclude, I came across this prayer and I wanted to share this with you. My life shall touch a dozen lives before this day is done. Leave countless marks for good or ill ere sets the evening sun. This is the wish I always wish, the prayer I always pray. Lord, may my life help other lives it touches by the way. And my hope for all of you is that you're inspired by that prayer. Personally, I like the idea of my life touching other lives in a meaningful way. And I want to work toward making that a reality every day. One famous quote that I mentioned earlier by Albert Einstein, setting an example, the only means. We all have a choice as to the kind of example we set. We wake up every day and we have choices to make. We have a choice. That's a wonderful thing about our God. He gave us free will. He gave us the free will to make choices. I can choose to have a banana. I can choose to have a cheeseburger. No, cheeseburger sounds really good right now. I can choose to do something I know is not good for me, or I can choose to do something that I know is good for me. We also have a choice as to the kind of example that we set. You can take the attitude of, I don't care. Well, I'm not living for anyone else. I'm living for me. Or you can say, you know what, I really do care how I come across to people because I want people to see Jesus in me. I have this light of Christ in me. Why in the world would I want to put a cover over it? When we're out camping and it gets dark, when we're out camping, we don't have street lights. We don't have your typical lighting that's available. There's usually not any lighting available except what you bring with you. And one major source of light is the campfire. And what does a campfire do? A campfire attracts people. Campfire brings people, maybe to hear stories, share stories, make up some s'mores. Ooh, yummy. But it's light, and that light attracts people. We have that kind of light in us. It's called Jesus. It's called the Holy Spirit. It's shining out. People will see that light. We can't be doing stuff setting the kinds of examples that put a cover over it and keep people from seeing it. People need to see it. We have a choice. As ambassadors of the King of Kings, we don't have just a choice, we also have a duty to set a positive example by representing him, representing Jesus, and not representing ourselves through our words, actions, and attitude. And when we do that, we will be the best kind of influencer. One closing thought that I have for y'all. What we are going to struggle with each day is that flesh that wants what it wants, and it wants what it wants regardless of what anybody else wants, regardless of the fact that you're an ambassador. It just says, I want. And every day we have to make a choice to say, not going to do that. I'm rejecting that. And instead, I'm choosing to set the example that Jesus set for me. Jesus didn't say it was going to be easy. It's not. But it is a worthwhile lifetime endeavor. Now I'd ask that you all please stand for the apostolic blessing. And Pastor Joyce will be coming up. Please, if you need prayer, let us know. We'd be happy to pray with you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. And may Almighty God protect you. In the name of our